back to Parenting Unpacked. Kristyn and I are the hosts of this podcast, Dr. Kristyn Summer and Dr. Siobhan Kennedy Costantini. We just tried to do the intro at the same time, both talking. And despite our wonderful capacity to talk over each other, we can't coordinate or sync our talking. So we couldn't do it. So I just took over. Hello, how are you?
Synchronicity is just not our strong suit, and it's definitely not our strong suit when we are not in the same room and we are on the internet, where I am adamant there was a lag, and let's just put it down to that, or that synchronicity is not a skill that we have. Either way, how am I? Well, we record these intros and outros after our guests. So this week we have a guest, Dr. Lisa, and Siobhan and Dr. Lisa were having a truly magnificent healing conversation, which triggered a panic attack for me. So I am actually okay, because I didn't, it was the start of a panic attack, which I was able to recognize and wind back. And I used that insight to prompt a different kind of discussion to see both sides of the coin, both the healing aspects as well as the people that aren't in the healing journey yet and aren't ready for the positive bits, which was me. So I am feeling complicated, and that's nothing new. How are you?
Well, I'm good. I'm glad that so I spoke to Lisa afterwards just on chat saying thanks so much. Sorry that the ending was chaos because Kristyn had to run off to a meeting. But we just talked. She was very worried about you, and she wanted to check that you're okay. And I said, look, Kristyn is very good at looking after herself. I said that she's very good at asking for her what she needs. And we both shared that we were really glad that you spoke up and said something so that we could kind of hear your perspective and talk through the other side of the coin, exactly like you say, that it's not that either of us were saying it's all sweetness and light, but we were at that time talking about the more positive side of things. And then it gave us an opportunity to talk about the less positive side of things as well, to give a more round picture.
Yeah, definitely. And I am actually really interested to watch that video back, because I definitely dissociated and completely shut down for a little while there. I don't even know how long it was. But I just couldn't hear anymore. And then I could feel the anxiety in my body, start to get tense, more and more tense. And I used to, when I felt that, start to panic, because I thought that there was something wrong with me and I was sick. And so at that point, I had the negative thought spiral of I need to go to the bathroom. I need to leave this conversation right now. I just need to go. I just need to turn my camera off. I just need to leave and go. And then I was hold on, I know what comes next. My body goes cold next, because that's how my panic now instantiates itself. And then sure enough, my body went cold, and I was like, okay, this is just a panic. I'm not sick. I'm fine. I'm just going to take a minute, breathe through it, let this conversation reach a reasonable stop. And then I'm going to interject and I'm going to talk about it. And I think talking about it really helped. I think the discussion we had afterwards, we didn't have long, because I was also watching the time, being cognizant of the fact that we were going to run out of time before my meeting. And I'm very proud of myself for not turning the whole podcast off and just going, knowing that would probably have closed our entire podcast recording down there. And then
look, I'm amazed. So I kind of had a gist of that happening, because Lisa was talking at the time, so on the Zoom you were the little window, but I just kind of noticed something was off on your face. I was like, Chris is not doing great. She'll speak up. Hopefully she'll speak up if she needs something, and you did, and that's wonderful. But that is, so I've experienced panic attacks. I haven't had one in a while, thank goodness. But I've definitely had them. And brilliant. I have not got to that stage of ever being able to sit with it and sit through it. My default is, okay, bathroom, shower, run away, shut it down.
Run.
Which is a perfectly reasonable response to that level of
fight or flight,
adrenaline in your body. Yeah,
fight or flight.
It's a millennia-old mechanism. It works really, really well when it's designed to do what it's doing. Obviously, it sometimes goes into a hyperdrive, and that's what we see. Exactly. So the level of capacity and willpower and strength that you were able to just sit through it, freaking amazing. In awe.
To be fair, though, that's probably because I've been having a lot of panic attacks lately, and I've had a lot of experience now with stopping them. So, you know, that's a
good
exposure. Is that exposure therapy? Like,
I guess so. They talk about how like one of the best things for like really intense anxiety and panic attacks is helping you learn that you're not sick. Your heart feels like it's going to explode, but it's not going to explode. And exactly like being not comfortable, but being exposed to the idea that it feels this way, but it isn't this way.
Yeah, I think actually a principle that works really well with my panic attacks is something that works well with parenting as well. So, irony, they always link in together. And that's that I kind of approach it now with curiosity. So I'm like, oh, what's this? What's going to happen next? Like, rather than panicking and saying it's this, it's what is this? How is it happening? What's going to happen next? Rather than leaping to the first negative cognition available. And I think you do the same thing with children, right? You approach them with curiosity and wonder rather than judgment and fear. That really works well. So yeah, I thought, I think part of the reason why I sat through it so well and came out so well is because I really get a lot out of sharing my experience. And I was like, let's move through this. Let's acknowledge it and talk about it for other people. Like, it wasn't motivation for me to be like, I need to do this for myself. It was, let's help other people know that this is triggering. Let's teach them something. So I seem to be doing that with a lot of things. It's never about me. I can't go to talk therapy. One of the things that triggered me was when Lisa said talk therapy, and I was like, fucking, that never worked for me. I can't go to talk therapy. It makes me very uncomfortable. And I was just like, so of course I'm never going to heal. Anyways, we're kind of leaping too far into the podcast episode today. So I will just leave you with that little cliffhanger for let's watch or hear how Kristyn went into a panic attack when it was the most beautiful, happy conversation we've ever had on the podcast. It was so happy and beautiful.
No, but do you know what? I think that's so telling, right? That because beautiful, like it nothing is ever one thing. Nothing is either black or white. There is so much beauty in the gray, in that there is
your
like
favorite phrase.
It is my favorite phrase. It's and I made it up myself. How clever am I? Kidding. Anyway, but yes, that there's that it's not simple, and just like what one person finds really beautiful and healing and what another person can find really triggering and awful. So and also you can find it both of those things at the same time.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to be one or the other. So
anyways,
as I said,
without further ado, here is the conversation that was both simultaneously triggering and beautiful, from the one and only Dr. Lisa, who is at Dr. Lisa.
At Dr. Lisa Researcher.
At Dr. Lisa Researcher on Instagram, doing a brilliant job of knowledge translation and science communication for parents so that you don't have to read the science, because she's doing that. So let's get into the episode. Hi, Dr. Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Alive.
Very well. Alive. It's a low bar, Kristyn.
I set low bars. I like to under promise and over deliver, you know, but to myself. Yeah.
Yep. We're surviving, not thriving at the moment.
Exactly. I mean, no, we want to thrive, but anyways, moving on. Dr. Lisa, tell me about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so my name is Lisa, and I am a postdoctoral research associate at a university here in Sydney, but I am on my second maternity leave at the moment with my 8-month-old baby, who is sitting in front of me. So if you hear little noises and baby noises, that's who it is. It isn't me making weird noises. And it could
also
be.
fine. Also fine.
Also fine. I also have a almost 2.5-year-old who is at daycare at the moment. She has the energy of 1,000 suns, so she's in the right place at the moment, running outside and painting and doing all sorts of cool stuff that I don't think I've got the energy for while I've got my 8-month-old in front of me. So a little bit about my background. So I haven't really spoken about this on Instagram, but I've got a Bachelor of Psychology. And after I finished that, I went into disability work. So I've actually got a Master's of Education in Sensory Disability. I worked at a big charity here in Australia who works with people with vision impairment, and I got my Master's while I worked there. So a lot of my caseload there was kids, usually school-age kids, so kids who had vision impairment and other disabilities as well. But my youngest client was a baby, and my oldest client was, I think, in her 90s. So worked with the breadth of people. Wow.
So cool.
The whole spectrum.
Yeah,
the whole spectrum, the whole life course. So while I was at that job, a PhD opportunity came through where my supervisor and my now boss wanted somebody with that specific discipline to do a PhD looking at the implementation of a health promotion program in people with vision impairment. So that's what my PhD was. We did a randomized control trial of this health promotion program that has been shown to be effective in the general population. And we were trying to investigate whether it would be appropriate for people with vision impairment. I'm holding a banana as I'm talking about this.
See that?
Banana, because I've got
good audio description going here.
Exactly. So my thesis was about implementation, and it was a behaviour change thesis as well. So we looked at how participants in the study changed the behaviour, what they thought of the program, how it would fit into existing services. And through COVID, what was fantastic about COVID was that we actually got the opportunity to trial delivering it through a camera, through Zoom or whatever program that person uses, because it's a common misconception that people with vision impairment can't use technology, but actually technology is a very good thing for people with vision impairment and other disabilities. So the program that we delivered was actually being delivered during the pandemic, which doesn't happen a lot in research. You don't often get something that's shown to be effective and then pretty much deliver it straight away in a real world situation. And it's kind of why I came to Instagram. So I'll change here a little bit. So I became a mum 2.5 years ago, obviously, and I had a really tough time with it. I developed postpartum depression, and I had a lot of trauma around feeding and my stay in the hospital, which I've spoken to you, Siobhan, about in the past. And I'm sitting here holding this screaming baby. So my baby didn't have diagnosed reflux, but everything sort of points to her having that, especially in comparison to my new baby. So I'm holding this screaming baby who's vomiting constantly, not knowing who I am, what's happening, all this kind of stuff. And as most new mothers, I sort of turn to social media and I'm reading Instagram, and that can be good and bad. I'm laughing, Kristyn. You would have done the same thing as well.
Yes, I had the same feeling. It was more bad than good. Yeah.
Because so for me, it was such a challenging time of my life, and all I was seeing around me were mothers who were thriving and absolutely loving being a mother and loving all the cuddles and loving all the things, and I was sitting in my home crying, thinking, what have I done to my life? With my life, what on earth have I done here? So it took a long time to find the community that I have now. What I started doing was, at the same time, I was reading research papers, and that was kind of a way to soothe myself as an academic. I like to go to the research directly and see what it's actually saying. I don't trust what I see on Instagram and social media otherwise very easily. Like I imagine you too as well. So I take everything with a grain of salt. So anything I was reading, I was going, okay, so what does the research actually say? And often there wasn't a lot, or it said something different. So that's fun. So at the same time, I was desperate for community. I was desperate to find other mums who were in a similar situation, who weren't just, hashtag blessed all the time. So I started sharing what I was reading. And over the last almost 2 years, I've built a little bit of a community, which has been fantastic. And I met you two and other people. And I realized that, the perfect pictures of mothers enjoying their babies isn't actually the majority of the situation, except for the fact that I'm in a bubble of other mothers who are similar to me. So obviously there would be other mothers, I'm sure, out there who are loving it and enjoying it. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy aspects of it. Of course, I love my kids, but in general, I do find parenting very challenging. The monotony of it, the uncertainty of it, it's both monotonous and really different every day at the same time. It's really bizarre. And the last 2.5 years have gone so fast but so slow. It's really weird. What were you going to say, Siobhan?
I find that it's monotonous in the worst ways and different in the worst ways too. And I wonder whether this speaks to all of us as kind of like analytic academic type brains, where we're trained, we've spent thousands of dollars, and the government typically has given us like tens of thousands of dollars to learn how to identify patterns. Through our scholarships and through our funding and through our education, we look for patterns and we make meaning. And babies are unpredictable things. So I at least my experience with my firstborn was constantly searching for patterns to try and figure out what his behavior meant. And a lot of the time there is no answer. We don't know what's wrong. We won't find out. I just had to learn to be with him and soothe him, which took a very long time, because I had to throw all of the instincts out of the window of find the pattern, find the solution, fix the problem. And then when they finally do start doing something in a predictable manner, then they switch it up and do it differently again. So when you finally feel like you have a sense of dopamine hit of, I know what's going on, finally I found the answer, it changes. So, and then it happens again and again, and then it breaks your brain.
Absolutely. And Siobhan just went a little bit robot-y, so we're going to tell her to turn her camera off, because Siobhan seems to be the problem child with internet reception. So the problem child will turn her camera off, and hopefully we won't have any more robot audio. We will give that our best shot. But the point she was making was that somehow infants thrive on routine and humans thrive on routine, yet somehow the routine of infants changes almost daily, which is completely counterintuitive to the definition of a routine. Anyways, I will ask the next question, Lisa.
Yes, go for it.
How, because this really ties into last week's episode, how did you go from postpartum depression to a second baby? Hold on, let me get the age gap right. You've got a 2.5-year-old and an 8-month-old, which means that there is like an 18-month age gap, maybe 20 months, whatever. Which means that you were pregnant at about a year.
Correct. So
can you explain
they're about 19? So they're about 19, 20 months apart. So it's interesting because I'm going to contradict myself a million times here. And I can imagine anyone who's a non-parent would be listening to this going, what are you doing? But
join the club.
And possibly other parents as well. What are you doing? So I've never been a particularly maternal person. I loved working with the kids, but I never really saw myself as a mother. And as I, dated different guys and got through my 20s, and I thought, parenting doesn't look that fun at all. It's probably objectively a bad idea.
Oh my God.
Very sensible approach.
It is.
I know. That's the logic brain coming through. But when my husband and I got together, it was interesting. We were mates for a very long time. We actually lived together as housemates. And I always thought to myself, if I'm going to have a baby, I'd have it with him because we're such a good team. And at some point, we eventually realized that we had romantic feelings for each other. And it was like it was like my fingernails or like my hair wanted to get pregnant by that stage. Like it was
everything.
the logic went out the window, and it was I want to be pregnant more than anything in this world.
I know that feeling.
Animal brain went, him. I need to have his babies.
Literally,
yes,
that's
exactly.
literally how it feels. Like you just all of a sudden you're like, I want to have a baby, and then it's all you think about all day, all night, constantly. You're just like, where is this baby? Your body just goes. Like you don't get a choice.
Yeah, exactly. And so my husband has always wanted a big family. He's always wanted to be a dad. He's a very paternal person. I don't necessarily want a big family.
That's a
but
lot.
yeah, exactly. But so once I was with him, we knew that we would have at least 2 babies. So even though I went through postpartum depression, I kind of wanted to rip that Band-Aid off and get that second baby when I could. And also my husband's a little bit older as well. So not too much older, but he's nearing 40. So he's thinking, oh, you know, I'm getting up to 40. I should probably have my kids now before I get a bit too old. At least that's how he perceived it. And so after I had my daughter, and I finally started to get treatment. So I started to get talking therapy at about 8 months. And we started introducing a bottle of formula at 8 months as well. So quite a bit of weight was coming off me at that point in time. And I was starting to get into the groove of motherhood a little bit more. Because, I had, and you guys were talking about this last week, is that you two were both very, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to talk for you, but you two were both very open to the idea of introducing formula and all that kind of stuff. But then once the baby's in front of you, you became, you know, obsessed with breastfeeding. Well, and that was what happened to me as well.
Absolutely.
For some reason, I thought, you know, no formula from then on, even though my daughter was actually in the NICU and had formula when she was in the NICU. So we had, you know, grounds to say that formula was perfectly fine for her, and yet I became obsessed with breastfeeding. So when we bought a bottle of formula, a can of formula at 8 months, and gave her a bottle, it felt like, it was really upsetting at the time, but it felt like a weight was lifting off me that I wasn't solely responsible for feeding this child, even though she'd been having solids for 2 months. Anyway, so with this second baby,
it's funny how it does your brain in, right? Like it's funny how you get hung up on these things.
Yeah.
Have you guys figured out why? Do you guys have any theories as to why we get so hung up on breastfeeding when the baby comes? Because this is what I've heard from a lot of women.
Well, I mean, it varies.
I don't have. You might have some actual research behind this, Kristyn. I don't have any like specific studies in terms of like experiments or anything, but they do have research to show that the way that a postpartum mother's brain sets itself up follows similar patterns to like obsessive and compulsive style brains and thinking. Yeah. And the thinking is that it's this kind of protective factor to really allow a mother to hone in on her instincts to protect her baby. The problem is it can go awry very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like it's not necessarily just an obsession with like that purist approach. So you've got like the social normative values that have changed across the last 60, 70 years from like, you know, breastfeeding isn't trendy, like formula feeding is what you do, or like wet nurses are like the vibe. To like now in common times, there's so much messaging around the importance of breastfeeding, and that is so important. And we want to increase breastfeeding, especially among the minorities that are most harmed by the history of wet nursing and things like that. However, I think it can actually mess with maternal mental health sometimes when it doesn't work. When breastfeeding, they don't have enough of a supply. There's also a lot of like mixed messaging about like from the sleep training community about the fact that your babies, you know, you need to give them a formula top up and all of this. So there's this like us versus them mentality of breastfeeding versus formula feeding. And it becomes this like hierarchical thing. But also you've also got the anxieties around infants that won't take bottles, or that will starve themselves rather than take a bottle, which was like my daughter. It was like I didn't have a way to escape I couldn't escape breastfeeding because we tried and she just wouldn't eat for hours and hours and hours on end. She wouldn't take a breast milk bottle, fresh or frozen. She wouldn't take anything that didn't come from a breast for her entire life. So I think you've got so many competing reasons for why it occurs. And that might be, if there isn't research on it, that could be why. It's just so variable and hard to identify. But yeah, definitely our brains change. And the hormones, the breastfeeding hormones, they do a lot.
Absolutely. Because for me, I got that rush of oxytocin when she was first born. But once she went to NICU and once I had a terrible time in the hospital, I never really got that feeling again as well. And so I wonder, for me personally, in my very specific case, I wonder if that need to breastfeed made me feel like I was her mother, like I was actually giving her something. That no one else could. It was almost a way to prove myself as a mother. And so I did a reel kind of like this a few weeks ago, where I talked about how a lot of us come into motherhood these days from professional study and from work, and we're used to having grades and performance reviews and all that great stuff that sort of gives us an indication of how we're going. But in motherhood, we don't have that. So we sort of cling on to things like how we feed the baby or how long they sleep at night or, whether or not we do purees or baby-led weaning or whatever it might be, to sort of prove that we're a good mother according to the social norms of what we see other mothers doing, instead of but that doesn't really work when you're a mother. That
is a great analogy though. That is a great analogy, because these are the motherhood performance indicators. These are the motherhood KPIs. And these motherhood KPIs are unrealistic. They're not KPIs we can set. We set ourselves KPIs, so like sales targets or achievable things that are realistically achievable. In motherhood, for some reason, our KPIs are impossible things that don't take into account that it's a whole other person that our KPI is based upon. So that's a really cool
actually
way to
sets the rules.
Exactly.
Like the baby is the one that sets the rules. We don't get to, and it's funny, like even if you like go against these things from a personal standpoint, you're in a mother's group or you go to a family barbecue and you have everyone asking you these questions. So even if you don't start out with these as personal beliefs, you get asked, how's the baby sleeping? How are you feeding? Oh, you're using formula. Oh, I see. Or, oh, you've decided to use purees. Or like all these kinds of, so even if you weren't stressed about it beforehand, it's very easy to be like, oh, am I not doing the best thing? Maybe I'm not doing the best thing. And then you go into a rabbit deep dive and then you get 1,000 articles telling you why you're a terrible person. And it's so easy. It's so easy to get hung up on these things.
Oh, the doom spiral.
Oh, God. We've all been there. Yeah. So I found the challenge from going from an academic where I was publishing papers and writing grants all day and doing all that kind of stuff. I've got a PhD and a master's and an undergrad, so I've done a lot of testing, a lot of projects, all this kind of stuff. And then, coming into motherhood and holding this screaming baby who I had no control over was such a mind fuck. Such a moment of like, oh my God, I have no control over this. But I tried to control her. I tried to make her work for me, which is completely different to how I approach motherhood this time with my son. But I think we almost kind of all go through that in a way, that challenging, that matrescence and changing our identities and what we view as success and that kind of thing. So I started talking therapy at 8 months, and I started to feel a bit better. In order to get through the days, I was going to work with my husband. He owns his own business, so he's got a bit of flexibility. So I was going in, and I don't really have family nearby, so I was going in and sitting next to him while he was working, just so I wasn't alone. And I'm quite an introverted person. I quite like my own space and my own company. But when you've got a little baby, it's very different.
Yeah, it's so different.
So different. Like people become this lifeline.
But also you aren't like, when you've got a little baby, you're not alone. You're not in your own space. You're in somebody else's space, and you are like, I don't want to say slave, but you are a slave to somebody else's desires. And so you aren't ever alone. So sitting next to someone gives you that feeling that like you might be able to take a second alone. Like, yeah.
Even if you don't actually get, even if you don't get space, there's the theoretical possibility of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because with my daughter, I didn't leave the house on my own with her until I was 7 months postpartum or something, because I was just so afraid to be alone with her out in the world. It just seemed so unbelievable. So going to work with my husband was sort of like a nice step in the right direction to getting out therapy. And seeing people and actually talking to people. Yeah, and exposure therapy. Exactly. And so at the same time, I was able to start sort of doing those Instagram posts and creating a page and starting to summarize that information. And science communication is such an interesting thing, and it's sort of taken me this whole time. I think I'm starting to get it. But because consolidating such complex and nuanced information into an Instagram post, I'm always, it takes me hours, because I'm always terrified that I'm misreading the research or that I'm putting my own biases in it, because we're all human and we've all got our own experiences. So of course we're all going to take different things from papers. But yeah, it's just a bizarre thing. And I think I'm just starting to get it now, but it's taken all this time and lots of mistakes to get here, but we're getting
Don't
there.
worry. Siobhan and I have both had our challenges in that space. Video is far more forgiving. I can tell you that. Switch to reels. They are far more forgiving because it's your voice, and you can imbue it with your like tone and you can hedge the things, and you can say, this is what some of the evidence says. However, that doesn't apply to everyone, because as much as we can communicate science, we know that science isn't the be all end all. However, lots of people don't. So the most important thing to do in the science communication is to clarify that it's not the be all end all, and that it's just an aggregate of all humans. It's not even like, might not even be culturally specific to you. So yeah, video is more forgiving, if I was ever to tell you anything.
It's so funny though, like with you're absolutely right, it is more forgiving. And even if I say all those things in a post of like, this is just one particular sample, and they're like, people are like, but I'm like,
they don't read it or they don't hear it. I feel like in video they hear it, like they know it, because you add it, and it's as emphasized as the rest of the content, I think. But anyways, this is totally irrelevant.
No, it's super relevant. Don't stress.
Back to you, Dr.
It is interesting.
Yeah, I find it interesting because coming from my background, which is implementation and sort of translational research, I get very frustrated with the idea that research that the public is paid for through grants and government funding just sits behind a paywall. That frustrates me to no end. So being able to summarize information to get it into the hands of parents sooner than 17 or 20 years or whatever it is. So this science communication, I find it interesting. I wonder if, I'm sure your listeners will find it interesting too. So coming up to a year postpartum, I was starting to feel a little bit better, had a little bit more of my freedom back with the formula. For me, I know some listeners would feel that freedom with fully exclusive breastfeeding or fully exclusive formula feeding, but for me, in my specific case, having that bottle of formula, knowing that she could be fed independently of me was a lifesaver. And so I started to feel a bit better, and we thought, all right, let's go for a second one. And we were lucky enough that we didn't have any issues with infertility, because that's the other thing with motherhood is that we sort of look at it like, oh, I want a kid at this time, that would be really convenient or whatever. We try and plan these things, but then your body, you sometimes don't have control over what your body's doing either. So we thought we better try sooner rather than later, just in case. And I got pregnant around the year mark.
Wow.
So having a toddler while pregnant is really challenging, as you know, Siobhan. Especially just coming out of, well, you're still in your first trimester, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm 10, almost 11 weeks. Thankfully I'm starting to feel a lot better. But I had about a month, 6 weeks where I was just incapacitated. If I was awake, it's because I was at work. And then if I was at home, I was asleep or like curled up on the couch, which was really hard because he missed me so much. Thankfully, he's a bit older. He's almost 3. So there was I just told him I was sick. And he's like, the baby's making you sick? I'm like, kind of. So I'm like, I didn't want to put all the blame on the baby. So I tried to explain and he wasn't interested, which is also fine. But yeah, it is really, really hard. And I'm beyond grateful that it seems to be, I still don't feel amazing, but it's mostly out of I seem to be out of the depths of the morning sickness. So I'm able to be a lot more available, which is really nice. But yeah, it's really hard. And I'm grateful that he had some understanding so we could talk through some of those things. But your little one was not probably old enough to have some of those conversations.
No, so she didn't really, as far as we know, she didn't really know what was going on. So when my stomach got a bit bigger, she was able to point at it and go, oh, baby. So she kind of understood that. So she was, 19, 20 months when he was born. And we actually bought her a baby doll. Yeah, you can hear my son.
Sorry, it's beautiful serenading. I love it.
It is.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? So we bought her a baby doll, I don't know, when she was like 13 months old or something, just to prep her for the new baby. First thing she did was lift the baby doll up by its legs and smash the head on the ground a few times.
Bodes well.
Which scared my husband and I a fair bit. Thankfully, she's never done that to her little brother yet. There's still time.
Still decades.
But, yes, exactly. But I think because she was quite a bit younger, things like jealousy and that kind of thing didn't really take hold at that point. So when he was born, she was actually quite infatuated with him. She loved him, she kissed him, all that kind of stuff. I think it was a really good age for her at that point. Whereas now she's almost 2.5 and he can crawl. So he crawls and grabs her toys and she's like, no, and tries to do that kind of stuff.
Aww.
So we're navigating that at the moment. So, oh man, it was always going to happen though. But it's so hard. You guys were talking about this last week when it comes to, when you weren't necessarily talking about this, but when is a good time to have a second baby? And there's just so many variables. So people, because I had 2 under 2, people are asking, was that good for you? But I can't speak on behalf of anyone else because there's physical, mental, emotional. It depends on how
financial
much you have. Financial, exactly. That's a huge
so many factors.
Financial's huge. So I don't know if 2 under 2 was a good idea or not. They've just getting to the age where they've started to interact a little bit more independently of us, and I'm starting to get glimmers of that. That's going to be cool once they're a little bit older, and we can like take them to the park and they'll play together, and we can sit and have a cappuccino or whatever. But
that's a nice pipe dream.
Dream.
It's a pipe dream. It's what I'm going to have something to look forward to,
Absolutely. Focus on the positives.
3 years from now, you will be sitting having that cappuccino you've been waiting for years.
Absolutely, and it's going to be so good. But for you, Siobhan, like you'll have an older child, so perhaps the ability to communicate and negotiate to a certain extent with your older baby might be helpful. I don't know.
I'm not really sure. Like, I think you're totally right. Like, it depends on so many different factors. And I know people that have had like 11 months between babies, or closer to you, 20-ish months. And then people have had 3 and 4 years and 5 even. And like, I think for a lot of people, you don't know what's different and you just say, it's good. And if you have multiple children, then you can say, oh, for me, that was an easier gap. But also, exactly like you say, it depends on the child. Like, different children reach different things at different stages. And like, anyway, so I have no idea. I imagine that when I have this child, I'll be saying, it was a good gap for us. But also, what's the alternative? I wasn't pregnant before. So I don't know. So it has been it's been really fun. I think I said this in the last episode. It's been really fun because he is able to have conversations about the baby and for him to share his ideas, which are toddler ideas about how babies work. The other day we were driving home and he said, "Where's the baby gonna live? Is the baby gonna live in my house?" And I was like, yeah, it is. And you could tell him going, "Oh, I don't know if I like that." Oh. So like, I think jealousy is definitely going to be a challenge. He's been a lot more clingy in the last few weeks now that he's starting to realize. But then also he's really sweet sometimes. Like, he'll always ask me where in my tummy is the baby, and then so that he doesn't lie on the baby, even though the baby's the size of a jelly bean, so it doesn't matter. But there's moments of real sweetness and then some less sweetness. He also tried to attack my stomach with a fork. So, you know, we'll see how we go.
Vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other thing that I did in preparation for this kid, for my son, is I worked with Catherine from Mother Up, which you spoke about last week. Yeah. So I've become close friends with her, just like you, Siobhan, because of Instagram. So Instagram does have good things. It can build community, which can be valuable for new mothers, depending on who you're following. That's the only thing. So I met Catherine through Instagram, and so I booked her pretty much as soon as I found out I was pregnant. I said, can you help me? I don't want to have such a horrible experience like I did last time. And the thing is that you can put all the planning in place that you like, but postpartum anxiety and depression doesn't discriminate you. So I don't want anyone listening to this thinking, I shouldn't have it because I did all these things. It can happen to anyone, and it's never your fault. But I worked with her closely on how to put supports in place. So we assumed that paternity leave was going to be great. We were going to have so much time. My husband was going to cook all our meals beautifully. And it was within a week that we realised that my husband cooking these elaborate meals meant I was holding the screaming baby on my own.
All day, all night.
All day, exactly. So that wasn't working very well. So for the second baby, we did meal delivery services and things like that. We also had support. And we did shifts pretty much straight away. So I wanted to breastfeed again, but I also wanted to formula feed as well. So do a mixed approach this time. So I basically worked on establishing breastfeeding, working with an IBCLC to help me. And then, which is, I'm not sure, some people might not know who that is. That's a board certified lactation consultant. And then after that, we did bottle feeding and syringe feeding and things like that, so I could get extra sleep. The sleep it's very important to me. But also, my son didn't have reflux, didn't have colic. I could feed him to sleep, and he would sleep in his bassinet, which just blew my mind.
Brilliant.
I couldn't believe it because we held my daughter, so it was me holding her for 12 hours and my husband holding her for 12 hours. That was our day. But with my son, I put him down into the bassinet after a feed, and then he would stay there.
Oh my God.
Wow. And it's been a really interesting experience in that it's been very validating for me, because maybe I wasn't a shit mother the first time. Yeah. Maybe I wasn't like completely just misunderstanding her needs, or maybe it wasn't me that the reason she was crying all the time. Maybe she was just being a baby, and that was her as a baby.
Maybe it felt so hard because it was hard.
Exactly. Because I would tell people about it, and they'd just look at me and go, babies cry, right?
And I go, the gaslighting. I know
babies cry.
That happens
and now
so
I know.
often.
Oh, doesn't it?
Just the gaslighting. The gaslighting from everyone around you, because they don't know. They don't even realize they're gaslighting you, but they are, because they don't know what you're experiencing.
Yeah, because we use the same words to describe entirely different experiences.
Yeah.
Because we don't have other words.
Thanks, English.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So I all of a sudden had a baby who didn't cry for hours every day, who I could meet his needs, and he would settle, and I could put him in the bassinet. I had no issues with feeding him. And I was like, nothing's changed other than obviously the preparation that I did with Mother Up, but that doesn't change the baby at all. And so that's been quite a healing experience. I, feel competent as a mother, which is terrible to sort of, but we all do it though, don't we? That the way our baby sleeps and eats and all that kind of stuff, we tie our value to that. When often a lot of those things are out of our hands. And so yeah, it's been quite a beautiful experience in that way. But we also had all the support in place this time. So if we did get a baby who might have had any feeding difficulties or was a baby who cried a lot or had reflux, we sort of had that support in place so we could get sleep and eat appropriately and look after ourselves. So Catherine is amazing in that she's very mother-parent centric, very much let's look after you so then you can look after your baby, because your mental health matters. And because with my first baby, I was putting myself behind constantly. I was last on the list. And so that resulted in a mother who was afraid to be left alone with her baby after a few months. And whereas this time I put myself first, so my baby gets a mother who's, well slept, well fed, can look after herself for him. And that doesn't mean that I'm neglecting his needs or anything like that. That just means we're working within his natural biology and using supports outside of that. But the thing about being a second-time mum as well is that you feel, well, at least for me, you feel a lot more comfortable with the decisions and things that you do, and you understand the value of looking after yourself as well. So we incorporated bottles really early, and that hasn't had any problems for us. What was I trying to say? Basically that you're not second guessing yourself all the time like you do the first time. At least for me, you make decisions and you're okay with them, as opposed to thinking, oh, is this the right thing? Should I Google something? So I basically spent no time Googling anything other than the research papers that I do for my Instagram.
Wow.
I'm not like going, oh, my baby's poop is green, is that okay? Like, I'm not Googling things 10 times a day, not sure if something's good or not. I'm just trusting in his behavior and how he is during the day. And if there is anything, and I'm trusting my instincts as well, like if there is anything that I'm not sure, I'll then go and talk to my doctor and figure that out. But I'm not spending my days going, why is my baby crying all day? Can I do this? Can I do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? I've sort of gotten should out of my vocabulary.
Yes, I hate should. Should is a useless word.
It's terrible. It's terrible because our journeys are all completely different and we all have different resources, capacity, support. And so the way I feed or whatever my baby is going to be different to somebody else, simply because we're different people with different babies. And you become more comfortable with that rather than trying to always do the perfect thing, because that isn't the perfect thing for you and your family, possibly. So you do get a bit more comfortable and confident in your decisions in your parenting, I think, Siobhan. So you've got that to look forward to.
Hopefully. I think you're totally right. And I think at least the first time you can do all the preparation in the world, like you say, but it's an onslaught of a learning curve. And something I really struggled with is, as the mother of the new baby, everyone's going, well, do you think he needs this? Do you think he needs this? And it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Why are you expecting me to be an authority on anything? This creature just came out of my body like a few hours ago. I know nothing about it. And obviously it was nice that they were deferring to me instead of telling me what he needed. But I felt like a lot of the time in the first few weeks, at least, I wanted people to say, oh, that means this. When I was like, I don't know, don't ask me. He doesn't know what he wants. I don't know what he wants. I don't know what I want. Whereas I think, and then my husband and I, after a few months, learned to just answer all of those questions with, I don't know. I don't know, maybe.
We'll find out.
Yeah, exactly. And like and we'd do it to each other. Like we'd say, I'd pick him up, be like, is he hungry? And my husband would be like, I have no idea. So yeah, we learned to like deflect those questions, or like just have answers like, well, I don't know, maybe Mercury has got some funny feelings, or maybe the barometric pressure is off. So we learned slowly. But that when you're sleep deprived and exhausted and being screamed at by a small thing, and you feel like you have no information and are severely under-equipped for what is now your lifelong job, it's really confronting. Whereas I guess like the second time around, there's at least an understanding of like, well, at least I haven't killed the first one. So theoretically, there's the possibility that this one might be okay too.
Yeah, exactly. So I was obsessed with my daughter rolling. I thought she was getting to closer to 6 months and she still wasn't rolling backwards and forwards. And I thought she's never going to roll. She's never going to, you know, start walking and running and doing all this stuff. But now I've got this example of a toddler in front of me who's tantruming, running, screaming, laughing, talking, like she's hit all those milestones. And so I've totally relaxed about it with my son. Like, again, if my instincts tell me something's off, I'll get that checked out. But in general, you're just like, you know, they'll get there when they get there. Most babies get there when they get there. He'll be fine, kind of thing. So you don't have that anxiety around, you know, those things like milestones. I haven't even looked at the milestones since he was born because I just don't want that in my head, you know, thinking I want to enjoy him in that moment instead of thinking, oh, he should be doing this, this, and this. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to pause and interject here because I am starting to have a panic attack, and let's just walk through it.
I wondered if you were okay. Yeah.
I
saw your face and I was saying, oh, I don't know if she's doing okay. So how can we help you?
Well, it's not, I don't think I need to be helped. I'm very good at getting through panic attacks, but I do think it's important to talk through it because you guys have had this really wonderful, like joyful conversation about healing and healing babies. And it seems so easy and it sounds really easy, Lisa. It sounds like you've had this prototypical perfect transition into second motherhood with 2 under 2. And all of the things that you're saying are so brilliant to know that like your brain can change like that. But as you say those things, my brain is telling me that's not going to happen to you. That's not going to be something you're going to be able to do. And we know that I'm struggling more with the decision to have a second baby, and I'm still struggling with my mental health. And Siobhan is more progressed on that journey. So you guys are having this really beautiful conversation. But this is the thing, right? When you're sitting in your mother's group and you're all at different stages in your recovery, if you've all had different experiences of PPD and PPA, like you guys have recovered. You guys have healed enough to move on from that, and I haven't. And that's because I have other diagnoses that I'm still struggling with every day, and that's okay. But it does give me a different perspective because I'm not going to be the only person who listens to this conversation or conversations like this, because what this conversation has been a really nice, just general conversation. We're all a bunch of scientists, but it's more just been like a general mothers group conversation. And there will be people that sit there and listen to this kind of conversation and go, why don't I feel that way yet? What's wrong with me that I'm listening to that and my body is going cold and I'm dissociating and I can't hear it anymore and it makes me feel bad and my thoughts are spiraling in a negative direction. So I'm good at catching that and reprogramming those thoughts, but it still sends me down the panic spiral. It's usually the panic spiral that makes me go, oh, I'm really not feeling well, like time to start thinking about this differently. So I don't think I need any help from you guys, but I just want you to, it's not even your fault. It's just, I want the people that are listening to know that we can have these really beautiful conversations that are healing to some people, that are triggering to others. And that is okay because we're all at different points in this progress. So yeah, the whole time I was listening to you, Lisa, I was like, it's really beautiful what you've had, but has it been hard? Has there been any hard parts, or has it actually been as easy as it sounds?
Yeah, I can definitely talk to that. Yeah, so I'm not somebody who enjoys, I think I might have mentioned this before, somebody who enjoys being relied on 24/7. I'm quite introverted. I enjoy my own space. So having a baby breastfeeding from me 24/7 a day was not not something that aligned with my personality. Some people find that beautiful. I find that terrifying and scary.
Absolutely.
So then we add another baby on top of that. So I was still breastfeeding I was still breastfeeding my toddler when I had my new baby. This is why we introduced formula and things like that really early. But there has been some really, really challenging times in the last 8 months. So there was about a month or so ago where my daughter, who previously at her age was going down to sleep quite easily after doing our usual routine or whatever. It's not like it was a screaming match or anything. And then all of a sudden, molars, and I think she got a little bit afraid of the dark, and a few other things. All of a sudden she was screaming and crying, and she really needed a lot more support from us for hours after she usually goes to bed. And so what was happening was I'm feeding one baby to sleep, my husband's trying to support the other baby, and then I'm going into the next room to then hold the other baby to sleep for another few hours. And so there was a moment 3 weeks ago where I was holding my daughter and she drank out of her drink bottle and she spat it into my face, the water. And then and this was like 9 p.m. at night, right? After mothering an 8-month-old all day too. And then she did it again. So I grabbed her bottle, threw it across the room at the wall because I was just so angry. I was just at the end of my tether. And this is something I spoke to my psychologist about. And I felt really shameful about that. I felt, other mothers can hold their babies till 9 p.m. at night. Why can't I do it? There's always that moment of thinking, everyone else is better at this than me. And I've had lots of those moments over the last 8 months. So
I'm watching him. It's okay. I can see him.
Got him.
I'm your babysitter.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So there's been lots of moments where I've absolutely lost my shit especially in the last few months, because I've needed my own time. I've needed my own break. And usually with my first baby, when my husband would come home, I would get that break. But my husband comes home with the toddler now. So it's just another level of parenting that happens when he gets home. So it's not even like a relief. So most days I'm looking forward to bedtime. It gets to like 3 p.m. in the afternoon, like now. I'm thinking, can't wait for a few hours time. Getting close. So I want to acknowledge that having 2 babies so young has been the hardest thing. The benefit this time is that I don't have crippling postpartum depression. I'm not sure that I'm completely recovered from that. I still talk to my psychologist every month. But so it is different because of that, and I'm very thankful for that. But I'm like at 95% capacity at almost any point, that if my daughter does blow some water into my face, that tips me over the edge. So Kristyn, there's been some really healing moments in the last 8 months, and there's been some moments where I've just wanted to walk out my front door and go, okay, I need to leave. And I have actually done that in a way. I consulted with my husband before I did that.
You made sure that someone was on kid duty.
Exactly. He was the one who actually said, you need to leave the house, go to the shops or something, go get some chocolate or something. And so I left. And there's been plenty of times with my son where he's been a bit more agitated, and it brings me back to those early days with my daughter and her colic reflux, and I get really triggered by that. So I've had to put him down and walk to another room and breathe and then come back. So I know that we were having this beautiful conversation, but that it's also been some of the hardest stuff I've ever done. And I don't know that I would recommend 2 under 2. That's what I say to people. I don't think I would recommend this strategy. I'm not sure that it's the best one at all, or even a good idea.
It's just one. I don't think there is a good or bad one. There just is one. Yeah.
Exactly. But this is what we've been dealt, so this is what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Now, so I don't know if that helps, Kristyn, but
it does.
Yeah,
it does tremendously. Like we stopped the panic attack. I stopped the conversation so that I could salvage my mental health to some degree, which is great.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you helping me through that when we are interviewing you. But we're all about full transparency here. And in full transparency, Absolutely. I am 3 minutes late for a meeting. So I'm going to let you and Siobhan finish the conversation while I go and duck off to my next research meeting. And I look forward to hearing from Siobhan what you chat about after the end of this. See you later.
Thanks so much, Kristyn.
Enjoy your meeting. Bye.
I don't know if I can hold on. I don't know if I can leave. It just says end.
You're the host.
Damn.
You're the host.
I don't know how to fix that.
Okay, well, maybe. Sorry, Lisa. As you know, you've listened. Oh,
chaos.
No, there's Kristyn.
Yeah, I'm still here. I haven't left. I can't leave.
Oh,
if I leave,
I
leave, the conversation ends.
Okay, well, I was just saying that Lisa's heard our episodes before, and she knows what a professional and tight operation we run. Her laugh says everything. So we might just end the episode there. Thank you so much, Lisa. We'll have to have you talk more about your research stuff, because I love.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've done some posts with you, and one of my favorite posts we've done together is the one all about the fact that, like you said earlier, there is no research into so many things regarding mums and babies because of funding concerns and because of social interest and all kinds of other things. So we'd love to have you as a repeat guest. But thank you so much for sharing, being vulnerable and opening your heart and lives and conversations to us. And
you're so welcome. Grateful. And thank you for being so accommodating of my little bubs in the background.
Thank you to our listeners. This is just who we are. Yes. Welcome. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Welcome to the Chaos Party. Thanks for joining. Yeah.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Welcome back. You just heard the most chaotic end after the most beautiful and then not bit. I don't know. It was a chaos episode, just like every episode we've ever had. We are a chaos sandwich, and that is okay. So you just heard a very rushed end.
Sandwich.
That's my new phrase. Do you like it?
My favorite, I do. I love it. My favorite bit of the ending is where I said that we're a really professional operation, and Lisa just laughed out loud, which was the correct response and very much the one I was looking for. But I was like, perfect. She gets it. She gets us.
Total vibe. It's just, that was chaos. But I had a meeting with someone in Tasmania about a social media and parenting research study, because I'm finally getting into my social media and parenting research stream. That's taken me a year to get off the ground.
That's how research works. Slowly.
I know, but I got into that meeting only 5 minutes late, and it was a very successful meeting. I know. So stay tuned for when that research occurs, because it's going to be really fun. And I will recruit all of our listeners to do the study for us, because we need people. We need lots of people. So anyways, Siobhan, other than the whole panic attack and realizations that sometimes healing things for some people can be triggering and traumatizing for others, you want to know what I really took away from that conversation?
What was that?
Parenting KPIs.
Yes.
I
remember
really
when I first saw her sharing that, I was like, that is so true. We go through our lives, and I mean, not all of us, but a lot of us go through our lives with these we have goals, and whether or not they're self-imposed, but they're almost always quantifiable. Yeah. And a baby is anything but quantifiable.
So let's just obviously the parenting KPIs that aren't working for us are baby sleeping through the night, child being seen and not heard, acting perfect, being an angel, being academically excellent, whatever, ascribing all of these performance evaluation metrics to another human that evaluates somehow your value as a parent. What are some KPIs you reckon should be parenting?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think this is really informed by my circle of security training that I did recently. I think one woman shared in the group with she shared about how a concept in circle of security parenting is delighting in your child. That one of the functions of a parent is to delight in a child, and children deserve to be delighted in. I think it's beautiful, and it's so true, and it's a really great way to describe those magical moments that you have of like connection, where you're like, you just kind of in your mind, you're like, you're the freaking best. And you really get that energy back from your child. And she shared that her first husband, who she said some things about how the marriage was a disaster, but she said that she still really struggles to delight in her 10-year-old, because when she was a baby, her husband would come home and say, well, what have you done all day? And just being with the baby and watching and delighting in the baby wasn't enough. So as such, she still struggles. So I think to flip that entirely on its head, delighting in your baby, delighting in your child, doing that ideally hundreds of times a day, but at least a handful, or even just one time a day, finding a moment where you can acknowledge pure delight in whether or not it's watching them in their eyelashes as they fall asleep, or watching the crinkle in their nose as they laugh, or watching them fart and find that hilarious, which is my child's current favorite thing to do. He does a fart and then goes, ha, 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 I farted. And like, yeah, you did. And that's hilarious.
It smells terrible. Cute. Thank you for that.
Exactly. So I think that is definitely one of my current, like I am choosing to focus on that a lot as one of like my personal parenting KPIs.
Yeah. I don't know how achievable it is when it's correlated with mental health. It might not be a KPI
absolutely.
for mental health challenged parents at that current moment. One that I think is a really like easy one is tell your child you love them. If we focus on KPIs that are about you rather than about your child, saying I love you every day, that's a great KPI. Providing security for your child. I don't know what else. Like they're all just things that are behaviors that
there's you can delight. So delighting is obviously like one specific step, and if you are struggling with your mental health, it would be really challenging. But I think you can, even if you're in the depths of it, I still, when I could, try to take an opportunity to, if not delight, at least like experience some, or mentally acknowledge gratitude for you're here, I'm here, you have cute toes, or like just one teeny detail that you can really
I think we can take that KPI down. We can adjust that KPI for where your brain is at. And I think you can just say, notice one small detail about your child that you haven't noticed recently. Have a look at the way that their belly button is in or out. Have a look at the fact that their nails are really long and their eyelashes are really luscious, and just notice something. Instead of focusing on the behavior or the difficulty or the chaos, just focus on one thing you see about your child, or try to focus on their play and see one thing. So our parenting KPIs, in my view, should be less about what your parenting produces and rather what your parenting is. Are you telling them you love them? Are you giving them a hug every day, if that's something your child enjoys? Do you sit down for 10 minutes every day and just play something with them? All these kinds of things that are parenting behaviors. Those are your parenting KPIs. They're the things people should be asking us how it's going. Like, have you told them you love them today? Yeah, of course I have. Oh, that's beautiful. Like, it shouldn't be, are they sleeping through the night? It should be, have you told them you love them today?
These behavior-based things are so, and I completely understand how and why they happen, and nothing against any parent that's finding themselves fixating on it, because I was there. And sometimes I still am. But I saw in a Facebook group that I'm part of but never post in, something about someone's 4-year-old is only sleeping. I know. I think she said my 4-year-old's only sleeping 10 hours a night. I've spoken to a few different sleep consultants. What do I do? Thankfully, there were lots of people in the comments going, maybe he's just a low sleep needs baby or child. Maybe that's his normal. But there were a lot of people suggesting all these things. But I think we really need to stop and think, are we trying to control, or are we trying to, and like society tells us to do these things because children should be seen and not heard, but trying to come from a place, like you were saying before, of curiosity, come from a place of, is this my child? Are they happy? Are they tired? Are they well rested? Like, why am I concerned about this? And try to take a big picture curiosity approach.
Yeah, I definitely think that, I mean, we all forget it from now and then, but definitely the thing that I try to remind myself all the time is approach with curiosity. And I don't get to it very often because like the hustle and bustle of every day is chaos, especially on weekdays when you only see your kid for a couple of hours in the morning and the evening. If that, I mean, I do because my kid stays up late and gets up early, so I get lots of extra time with my child.
And what a beautiful thing that can be.
Such a beautiful thing, having a low sleep needs baby. Anyways, moving on from the KPIs, maybe you guys can share with us what you think a parenting KPI should be, because it should be focused on the parent, not on the child. So share with us your ideas of what parenting KPIs you think would be best to measure our performance as parents. Not that we really need that measure, but anyways. And while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to introduce my fidget of the day because I realized I did it last week and I think I'm going to keep going. My fidget today is a Lexicon, and I dissociated hard when I was in the middle of that panic attack, and I really enjoyed just watching it and sticking my finger in it and getting it caught and noticing that sensation while I was fidgeting. So yeah, it's a Flexicon. If you're watching the video, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, go and Google it. I don't know.
It's very cool. It kind of reminds me of when we were kids. Like, did you make those like paper chatterboxes?
Yeah, it does remind me of that.
It kind of reminds me of like a 3D hexagonal version of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just got spoiled. Someone sent me, like, I ordered an advent calendar. I know. I ordered an advent calendar off of Sensory Street, which like I immediately opened the box and pulled everything out so I could look at it and admire it, and then I shoved it all back in. But because I don't have any self-control. But they because I shared their advent calendar on my stories, they sent me like a bunch of other like little presents that we could open, and I put a video up. But yeah, I'm really enjoying my Flexicon today. So anyways, stay tuned for next week's fidget of the day.
I mean, so far their fidgets are a big hit for you, so it's really an investment on their part. I'm sure you're going to spend big for years to come on all of their fidgets.
I was going to say so unhealthy, but it's not. Like, it's so healthy. And I just have a reputation. I just run around my office at work now holding some kind of toy, and people just like, I don't know, we were talking about fidgets the other day, and like, because I've only been at my job for 10 months. Like, I don't know, we're talking about fidgets, and like someone was like, no, she does that all the time. It's just who she is. Like, she's not being anxious. She just fidgets. And I was like, oh, you see me.
You see me. So the one that you had with Sienna, the kind of like the gel that like goes, a worm that goes in on itself.
Yes.
I had one of those as a kid, and I loved it.
That one's so hard to pick up. We dropped
really
it
hard.
500 times. It's amazing.
Yeah, I had an orange one as a like an 8-year-old, and it was one of my favorite things in the world. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, well, I guess I know what I'm buying myself for Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, fidgets are great for Christmas. I mean, go for it. I'm buying my husband and I loop earplugs because
I have them. They're really good.
Are they? Yeah. Well, because she's been screaming really loud, and like I'm getting more and more noise sensitive, and I think that's because I'm like my resting level of like autism, burnout, or whatever is like a lot lower. So I have more peaks now, like when I did with anxiety. And so I'm getting really sensitive to noise, and I'm putting my hands over my ears when she screams, and I'm like, that's an awful gesture for my daughter to see when she's screaming. Like, that's not okay. So yeah, we're getting loop earplugs for Christmas because it like my eardrums like actually shudder when she screams, and it really hurts. So yeah, I'm heading for some loops.
I had them when Timo was little because he screamed nonstop because that was his vibe, because he was in pain, and they were really helpful. I just kind of wore them all day, and they're good. They're kind of, they're noise cancelling. They're not I think they do sell actual like earphones that connect to music and stuff. But the ones that I had, the ones that I had are just like
noise.
They're earplugs that you can still hear things through. Yeah. So it's like the noise cancelling part. So yeah, they just turn everything down a notch.
Yeah, and I feel like I am not even like making this up. Like sometimes I'd be like, oh, I'm just being sensitive. My Apple Watch, it yells at me. It's like, you need to get out of this sound zone. It is damaging. Like, leave. And I'm like, oh, okay, good point.
Technology can be so validating. How good is that?
Anyways, Siobhan, do you have a fun fact Friday?
I do. My fun fact is that I am hiring staff for my business.
Holy shit.
Things are growing. I know. It's
Oh
really
my
exciting
God.
and weird and wonderful. So I've had new centers ask me to come deliver my play programs to
Oh,
them, and now there are so many that I literally cannot physically deliver them all. So I've
oh my
hired 2
goodness.
people, and there's a few more that
2.
I'm going to meet with. Yeah.
How many are you
They're all
hiring?
mums. Yeah. So
Oh,
they're all
cute.
mums, and they're only doing like a few days a week each,
That's really
because
nice.
I think it's really, for what I do, I think it's really important to have
Yes.
like a parent perspective,
Yes.
because not only like it's a lot of my stuff is play based, but it's a lot of it is attachment focused. And I think having a
Yeah.
child, and also I love, it's not a full-time gig in that I
Yeah.
couldn't pay someone a full-time wage. So
Yeah.
mums who only want a bit of work here and there, it's really well suited to. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've had someone already come do a visit with me and kind of watch how I do
Oh.
things, and I've got someone doing that again tomorrow, and I've got a few
Oh my
meetings.
God,
And
I want to come and watch.
Oh,
I
you
mean, I
could. You absolutely
could.
could.
I could absolutely come
Mm.
watch. I mean, I've got a blue card.
I,
I can come and hang out.
you could for sure. I'd love to have you. I don't have any on your side of town. The most south I'd go is Auckland
Fine.
Flower,
It's
which
fine.
is
I'll
pretty
come up one
central.
day. Like, we need to do, Ellen is our podcast producer, and Ellen, we need to organize a Christmas party in Brisbane. So we'll have a Christmas lunch and I can come up on a day
Perfect.
when you're doing your sessions. And then, sorry for our
Perfect.
podcast listeners, as we just organize our life. This is basically our phone call for the week. So, there's that.
It's true. We just record our phone calls.
Yeah. And like the most
Which is how you first
call podcast we've ever had was the
This
one with
is
Lisa.
how you first pitched it.
I
That's true.
did.
This is how you first pitched it to me, because we'd call each other about once a week and just download. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're like, we should record these. I was like, no.
So we can
You're like,
upload our
And then
download.
Yeah, exactly. And then for like a month, you just badgered me publicly and privately.
I did.
Yeah. And
I
was like,
assaulted
fine, we'll do
Siobhan
it.
publicly on her platforms, being like, everybody tell Siobhan to do this with me.
Yeah,
And it
but
worked.
how good? Oh, it's been a year. You shared on
Been a
your
year.
socials that it's been a year
Aw.
since we've been doing this podcast. How good is that?
It's so good. I'm so proud of us for actually doing, like, we've done like
Yeah.
35 or 36 episodes in a year. So like we didn't take off that many weeks. Like, I'm
No.
impressed. But anyways,
It's so
that is
good.
also beside the point.
What's your fun fact Friday?
Well, I was
Tuesday.
looking. So that's a good point. I was looking for our Journal Club article, because if you are just a pod listener, you wouldn't know that we are running journal clubs where we get like a bunch of scientists from all over the world. Siobhan can't come because it's at a time when she can't make it, but majority
But
rules.
I still read the articles.
I know. And basically these scientists from all over the world, we jump onto a live stream. I haven't figured out how to live stream yet, but I will figure it out.
You can do just to answer your question, because this is our phone call, OBS, which is live. It's like a screen record service, and then it depends which website do you use. Do you use Squarespace or Wix or
Wix?
Wix. You can sign up for a live stream. I'll show you.
But I can't live stream to social media. I need to live stream it to social media.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
no, I can't solve that problem.
It's fine. Anyways,
you're the tech one. Why am I trying to solve your tech problems? You're the techie one. You always fix my tech problems.
Okay, so I've been programming a robot for the last 2 days instead of figuring out how to live stream, but I will do it. Anyways, Journal Club is where we read an article every week. And this is what we actually do in academia. We meet and we talk about a single article. We talk about the strengths, the limitations, the findings, what they mean. Like, we talk about everything, and like it'll help like viewers understand how academics critique articles, to like take some of the like prestige and like black and white off of what research is and how it looks. But anyways, when I was searching for one, I came across a study that basically took like hundreds of thousands of tweets of parents with the word spanking in them, and like looked at what the trends were. And basically the majority of people talked about spanking as being negative, which is brilliant. That's what we want to see. We want to see that behavior change. The people most likely to talk about spanking as positive were fathers. So still a cultural norm thing, I think. Yeah.
That makes sense in terms of like punitive and the idea that the historically, traditionally, the father has been expected to lay down the law. Do you know, growing up, my grandma and mom would always say, just wait until your granddad comes home. He will roar.
Oh, yeah.
And then he would come home, but then he would roar, and it was a game. It was like he was being funny, and like it was but also because he was a big man and had a deep voice. I remember as a child being like excited and terrified. Because it was that like finally, when kids, and my
just
little
epitomizes childhood, really.
Yeah, you can tell my little one's scared sometimes, but he's like still like frothing and like really going for it. And I remember that feeling of my granddad coming home and roaring and thinking it was hilarious and a bit scary. Anyway, but yes, the sentiment, the reason that works is because that is traditionally how male figures in children's lives were expected to behave.
Look at evolution,
so hopefully
coming
we're
out on
that
Twitter.
tide.
Except we are all starting to boycott Twitter.
Well, I haven't used Twitter forever, thankfully, and it seems disastrous.
It's the worst echo chamber that there was ever an echo chamber of. Anyways, that's for another conversation. Parents, my only advice to you is to avoid Twitter and stay on the safe place, which is TikTok, Instagram. What's the safe place?
Yeah.
There is no safe place. Remove yourself from all
social media. Of your bedroom.
Oh, that's really bad when I'm a social media person. Like,
it's okay.
I am terrible at my social media job.
You can hate the player but love the game. I don't know.
Love the game but hate the player? I don't know. Anyways,
I don't.
Welcome to Awkward Chats with Siobhan and Kristyn, where there is no science, just a bunch of delusional mothers. Anyways, what a wonderful episode. It was a journey. That's all I have for you, Siobhan. Are you ready to say goodbye?
I am.
Okay. See you in the next one, crew. Bye.
Bye.